When we've lost a loved one or someone who's very dear to us, there are certain times of year that are harder than others. We're taping now in late November. Even though it's a nice day, it's cold outside, the wind is blowing a little bit, the days are short. It's a little harder to deal with things. Today we're going to be talking about some of the things that are difficult to deal with this time of year, especially around the holidays. And here with us to talk about that are two folks from Brattleboro Area Hospice. We have Connie Baxter, who's a bereavement care coordinator, and Cheryl Richards, who's a bereavement care counselor. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, how do we approach this? This is a time of year when any loss we've experienced is especially hard. Families get together, friends get together, we're supposed to be happy and celebrating things, but sometimes there's a tug on our heart when we've lost somebody at this time of year. What does Brattleboro Area Hospice offer in this area?
Well, we offer a number of things to support people as they're grieving throughout the year, and I think especially during the holiday time, it's important for folks to reach out to us. We offer support groups where people can come and talk with others who have lost a loved one. We have volunteers who work one-on-one with individuals, just to provide a listening ear and an open heart to hear whatever is on their minds. We have individual grief counseling. Cheryl and I meet with folks individually. We have a wonderful lending library that has about 700 books and tapes and CDs. We have our newsletter, which is available to anyone who wants it, and the November-December newsletter talks specifically about helping yourself heal during the holiday season, some of those challenges. We have community referrals. If folks need help beyond what we can provide, we help them find people in the community, professionals who can help them get through this time. And we just want people in the community to take advantage of our services. They're free of charge and they're open to anybody. You do not have to have any previous association with hospice in order to come and benefit from all these supports.
And your loved one could have died at any time?
Anytime, anywhere. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So do people come to you when they themselves make the phone call, or does a family member say, I think this person could use some help?
It happens both ways. Usually people call us directly, but I think often there's been someone in their circle of family and friends who've encouraged them.
Kind of nudging them along.
Yeah, because it's difficult for people to take that first step to sort of get out of their grief and reach out for help.
I'd like to add to that, aside from family and friends who might refer to us, sometimes we get medical professionals calling us about someone that they've been seeing who might be able to use our services. Sometimes therapists in town will refer their client to our services. So it's community-wide, you know. Luckily, more and more of the community is being aware of us and what we're doing, and that we're here for the community at large.
So is it that a person's grief could just be larger, but that the overall grief is larger, or that it's tied to something specific that you can actually sort of help change something about?
You mean during this time of year?
Yeah. What is there about grieving this time of year that makes it different from other times of year?
I don't know about different. It certainly can be one of the more intense times. So if you think about it, winter, especially in areas of the world that get serious about winter, so it gets really cold, it gets dark, the days are shorter, the light is weaker. That in itself, for people who aren't actively grieving a loss, many people start to find winter as a time to move inward and can become more isolated, less willingness to go out and be involved in social activities, A lot of people don't like driving after dark. So you're at home and you're alone, and that can be a wondrous thing. Winter's solitude is a beautiful thing. And when you are actively grieving, when you're feeling in the pits of your own darkness, to then be surrounded with the darkness outside of you, you're feeling more isolated. The holidays are happening, and people are walking around you and being cheerful, and you're wanting to smack them upside the head.
Mm-hmm.
And you're feeling more isolated because you're aware, I don't feel that way. And you're just getting it so much. And you don't want to bring other people down. You don't want to be involved. You don't want to be around them. It makes for a tough time. Yeah.
Particularly from the standpoint of nature, during the spring and summer, and even the fall, there are certain signs, certain symbols or cycles that have something uplifting about them.
Yeah.
But when it gets cold and raw and snowy and dark,
Yeah.
there don't seem to be those messages.
Oh, the messages are there. They're perhaps a little bit harder to hear. Winter, solitude. As I mentioned, solitude can be a really, really good thing, very powerful. Winter, encouraging you to go within and examine what you're carrying within. So these are good things. It's time to take stock. It's time to gather self and loved ones around and be together in warmth. That's really good. When it's encouraging you to do that anyway, and what you're carrying is so painful, it intensifies it, and then I'm not going to say it's bad, because I don't think that. It can become more than we're feeling like we can deal with on our own, which is the whole point of why we're trying to encourage people to seek the support. Everybody deserves going through something like this, to make use of us. Yeah.
So the first step is to make the call, or to in some way get in touch with hospice. And then once you start to work with that person, what's the next step for them to take, or for you to take with them, to begin to solve this, or at least address it or change it?
Solve it. I don't know about solving.
Solve's the wrong word.
Yeah.
Solving. Be with, open to, experience. Let yourself have it. Do you want to add anything to this piece before I keep muttering?
Well, I was going to say, usually the first step, once they've made the initial contact, is Cheryl, I will invite the person in to sit down and talk with one of us. Get to know them a little bit, find out where they are in their process, and find out from the person, let them know what we offer, and then hear from them what appeals to them, what they think they would like to engage in. So some people are very clear, yes, I would love to join a support group. And so then we find the support group that's the right match for them. Other people say, I'm really not a group kind of person. It's hard for me to talk in front of others, although our facilitators, and Cheryl is one of them, is a master at getting those shy folks to open up. But some people find the individual volunteer model very appealing to them, just to have someone who's not a member of their family or not a friend, who they feel maybe they're burdening with talking about their grief. Someone who can be their special person to just spend time and will listen. And our volunteers go through a pretty intensive bereavement training, so that they're sensitive to how to listen and how to talk to someone who's going through that. So we do our best to find out what they're open to and what their needs are, and to match them up.
So the bereavement volunteer would then go to the person's house, or they would meet somewhere and they would do something, or they would just sit and talk.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's a short-term relationship, and sometimes it's longer term, and it really depends on what the individual wants and is comfortable with, and our volunteers see them move through many phases of their grieving process, and very often are with them when they come out at the other end.
So the sort of the end of that relationship is by mutual agreement then, when it
Yes,
seems like it's not necessary or it's not needed or it's time
Right
to move
timing.
on.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really intriguing experience many times for both the volunteer and the person that volunteer is meeting with. You're not a friend, you're not a family member, you're not a colleague. What are you? So you're somebody who cares, and what we call like a transitional person. For a lot of people who are in the midst of their grieving journey, being able to reach out to others, even people that they've been close with before, or even sometimes family members, because that whole thing about burdening again. So it's hard for some people to be going out and getting what they need. So a volunteer this just flashed into my mind, so I'm going to say it. A volunteer is like a teddy bear, sort of,
Okay.
kind of. It's like this little buddy person, sometimes really tall buddy person, who is there to support you in what you need. There's no old history, so there's no judgment with how you're doing it. There's no connection to how you're supposed to be doing it. It's just a person who's there to help you build up the internal strength again, the emotional strength again, to get ready to take those steps back into the world. And it varies from person to person.
And when you said doing it the way you're supposed to do, you don't mean that there is a one way to do it.
Oh, there's never just one way
Okay.
to do anything. Yeah,
And certainly not grieving.
certainly not grieving.
One of the things that I think we help people understand is that each person's grief journey is unique, and there's no prescription for it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. There's no schedule. It's
I like that. There's no prescription for it. You're right. You're not sick. You're not wacko. You're not crazy, like a lot of people think they are when they're grieving. You just need to move through this life experience. You don't need a prescription. Yeah.
If someone decides that a group is maybe a good way to do this, are there different kinds of groups?
Hey, well.
Would you like to speak to that, Cheryl?
Let me just talk about those groups.
Okay.
That's one of the pieces that I'm taking over, are the groups. And as a rule, we have both ongoing groups occurring and time-limited groups occurring at any one time. And sometimes there's a hiatus in between. So for instance, right now we have an ongoing partner loss group that has been meeting for, 6-7 years. People come and go as it feels appropriate for them. We have, and now all of a sudden, in the last year, we have a lot of men coming to this group, and that's intriguing because men generally
Don't
are a
talk about this,
little less
yeah,
comfortable,
okay.
right, talking about it. So it's pretty awesome.
Congratulations.
I don't know what happened, but it's happening. And the women in the group are getting a kick out of it because they enjoy hearing the men talk. It's wonderful. So there's that group, that's ongoing. Another group that has been ongoing is the bereaved parents group. That is going to take a hiatus now until spring. So we have that. We had a traumatic loss group that was meeting once a month, and that also is taking a hiatus for now.
Could you say a bit more about that?
The traumatic loss group can include just about any kind of loss that we could say that any death loss is traumatic to the grievers. However, there are certain ones that, for instance, may have been violent through an accident. Suicide, that could be included in it. Often the death of a child, no matter how that child died, can be included in that. So it's a group more for people dealing with that kind of loss. All right.
Have you seen over time and with a lot of different folks in a lot of different situations that there are common denominators to things that work for them, or that tools or transitions to go through?
to help them get through this journey that they're on?
During this time of year.
And you're not talking about a group specifically, you're talking about...
Anything at all, as the individual, whether it's in a group or I'm meeting with someone who's just being there for me.
Yeah, I can say what mine is.
I know
and
there's
then you
no
can add to
should,
it.
but have you seen that there are common denominators to things that sort of work to get that changing?
Absolutely. And this is so simple and yet so powerful. And it's called presence and witnessing. And that's part of what the volunteers go through the training for. The being with. I cannot say how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, those are the two things that immediately come to me. You may have some other ones that you want to add.
Rich, were you speaking or thinking in terms specifically of the holiday season?
Yes, the holidays.
Yeah. I think the most important things for people to think about is to think about what they need and want during the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be a very conscious process. Maybe even sitting down and writing down a list of, what my family usually does, and of that, what do I want to do this year? What do I think I can handle? How do I want to change things? And then talking with your family about that and say, normally we do this, but I just don't think I can do that this year. So I need to do this other thing, which looks different, and I hope you'll support me in that.
I could imagine too that some of those discussions among family members could be very charged, having gone through the loss in the first place and whatever that involved for that group then family to come together again and say, let's talk about how we're going to do the holidays.
Right. That's, I think, a very, very difficult conversation to have at times, and one that might be easy to avoid. But when people do make the effort to have that conversation and work it through, I think that the holidays are easier for people. Yeah.
That's also something we can help facilitate for family members, if the entire family wants to get together and talk about it, or maybe just one person's willing to look at it. It's something we can help with if people want that kind of support.
I imagine too that you'll wind up getting that phone call or having someone show up in a group who's already gone through several years without a lot of planning or without a lot of forethought and just been bludgeoned by the whole thing, and then start to evolve something different.
Yeah.
Well, we're very fortunate in that we have two folks with us here today who have had this experience and who are willing to share that with us. So why don't we bring them on up?
Great.
We've been talking here today with Cheryl Richards and Connie Baxter of the Brattleboro Area Hospice about bereavement during the holiday season. And we're joined now by Laurel Powell,
Thank you.
and Greg Moschetti. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Well, you've been able to hear what we've been talking about for a while. Greg, could you start by sharing what brought you in touch with Brattleboro Area Hospice?
Actually, I came in touch with Brattleboro Area Hospice well after my loss. When I moved up here 6 years ago, I wanted to do something around death and dying and to help share my experience out and help other people. And so I became a hospice volunteer. So it's my first engagement with Brattleboro Area Hospice.
And as part of the volunteer training experience, how was that for you, having experienced that loss already?
It was really good. It gave me I think more of an understanding of not just what I went through, but what other people go through. Gave me more of an understanding of how to work with people who are dying, and how to be present for them in a way which was very different from my own experience, where when I lost my wife, I was present for her as a husband, which is different, I think, from being present for someone whom you've maybe built up a relationship, or maybe you've built up no relationship at all if it's a vigil work or something like that. So I think it gave me a broader and better understanding of how to be with death and dying and grieving.
Mm-hmm. And did that experience help you in your own grieving during the holiday season?
Yeah, well, yes, I would say yes. I think that my wife died 3 days after Christmas, and was in intensive care during most of the season leading up to and through Christmas. So the holidays had an opportunity, if you will, to be a particularly difficult time. And my two children and I, they were both adults when young adults when my wife died, had worked out a lot of things around the holidays to both commemorate her death and to celebrate the holidays. And I had thought we were pretty much through it. It was 10 years ago. It was actually 11 years ago this Christmas. And somehow the 10th anniversary of her death hit me like a ton of bricks. Yeah. And it was really hard to even explain or understand. It just kind of came somewhere out of the stratosphere, and it was like, wow, where did that come from? And I felt also that one of my children, my son, had not really worked his way through a lot of things that he probably should's maybe the wrong word, but he ought to. he ought to have. So I was at that point I was on the board of Hospice, and I knew enough to pick up the phone and call the bereavement coordinator, which is Connie's position now, but it was Elizabeth Pittman then. And she said, well, why don't you just come on and talk? So I went in to see Elizabeth, and I told her, what the situation was, and she gave me an exercise to do with my two children when they were up for the Christmas holiday. So I sent them the paper. It was a letter, sort of a lead into writing a letter to the person who's deceased about things that are still bothering you. And I went through and did it, and they went through and did it. And then at Christmas time, as was our custom, we got some yellow roses, because those were Marcia's favorite flower, and put them on a table in the living room. And we come from a Quaker tradition, so we sat in silence around this table for a while, and then we shared how we were feeling about their loss of their mother and my loss of my wife. And it was a good thing, and I don't think I would have ever thought to do it that way if I hadn't called the hospice office and talked to Elizabeth.
So you sort of created a new ritual about that, and felt like something shifted for you.
Something shifted in that time, yes. And interestingly, the yellow roses were a ritual that we had created back at the very beginning of working with the death. That we lived by the water then, and Marcia's ashes had been put out on the Long Island Sound. We'd put them out there. And so every Christmas we would go to a favorite spot and with 3 roses and put them on the water and watch them float out to the sound, into the sound. So the roses were always part of that. And interestingly, my son, was just engaged 2 weeks ago, yay, went to a Quaker meeting in Chappaqua, New York, where there's a memorial stone for his mom, and he went and put 3 yellow roses on the stone.
Wow. Well, Laurel, I just realized that we didn't introduce everyone who's here. Because you have a special friend. Could you introduce us to your special friend?
I do. This is Charlie Bear, made for me by his youngest sister.
Made the bear.
Well, she didn't make the bear, but she created
character.
him. when Charlie died, one of the first things that I did was to sort his clothes and then kind of ask people to come and take them, because Charlie was a clothes horse, I would say, and really had some good clothes. Well, his sister took a large garbage bag full of things, and when she got home to Colorado, she stuck the bag in her closet and hadn't touched it till last year. And she had this vision to get a bear and to dress him in clothes. So she took, button-down shirt that Charlie always wore, and khaki pants and his hiking boots. And this is Charlie's belt, his watch, and a wallet. And so Charlie Bear is relatively new to me, but he is now a part of our traditions, and he joins us at special events and his own birthday and things like that.
Well, we're honored to have him here today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's been an important new friend for you.
Yes, very much so. Mm-hmm.
What's your journey been like?
Charlie died 7 years ago, and I was fortunate enough to have hospice, so he was home during his last days, and I quickly just came to Cheryl's group within a couple months, and I think we decided I was rather raw at that time. But I stayed with the group for 5 years, and was sad to leave, but had a sense. And Cheryl, you always told us that we would know when it was time.
Could you tell us what shifted for you during that time that helped you know it was time?
It was an incredibly long journey. I think I eventually became me, and was able to forge ahead with a new life that I had or needed to create, and then was able to do that.
Are there things that come up for you this time of year?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Charlie and I never had children. We're teachers, and so had many children in our lives.
Many children.
But we didn't have our own families, so we were the flexible ones in our group, and we went to them. So it wasn't it was rather unusual, I should say. And most of my personal family is out west. Some of Charlie's family is here in Brattleboro, and our tradition was just see them on Christmas Eve or the day after. But I do have a very, very long-term friend who I've known since I was 10 years old, and she and her family, and now her children, my godchildren, are my family. And so Charlie and I had done Christmas with them and forever. And so going to their home was like going home for me. And it was incredibly important because the children had grown up with Charlie, and they wanted to keep him alive. So Charlie's stocking still hangs at the chimney with care, and is magically filled in the morning secretly by every one of us. And what's within the stocking is Charlie's favorite things: red licorice and M&Ms and peanut butter and things like that. And the family tends to continue some traditions that Charlie had always done with me. He spoiled me rotten and always gave me special gifts, puppets and jewelry. And after his death, we came across a stash of things that he had.
That he purchased ahead of time and haven't given you yet.
Yes. And so my friend took all these gifts and then gave them to me.
Over time.
Through the time. And then they continue the tradition by going to the same people, the vendors, and buy the same type of puppets and things like that.
So it sounds like a lot of what's worked for you is continuity.
Yes, and that the place that I am going to is comfortable because they are wanting the same thing that I am wanting. They want to remember Charlie and have him be a part of the celebration.
Was there any conscious planning about this, or did it just sort of happen?
I very honestly cannot remember
Mm.
that first holiday season, so I needed to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that I announced I won't be having any gifts because shopping, I did not want to go into any store. It was incredibly overwhelming and sad to see other people, like you had said, being happy and joyous. So I just feel like going to them is a cocoon, and it was a safe place, and so there was no planning. It just was.
It just was. It sounds like you've had a terrific support group.
Very much.
How about you, Greg? Other than your sons,
Son and daughter. Yeah.
son and daughter, have you pulled anyone else in, or has anyone else stepped in to sort of help you through the holiday season?
Well, I've remarried, so that is certainly someone helping me through the holiday season. I want to go back to something that you said about that first Christmas season, where it was incredibly difficult, and we had a lot of family traditions around Christmas, and my children and I, sometime I think probably during the summer, said, what we can't do is we can't be home for Christmas. We just felt a real compulsion to stop all of that, at least for that year. And so we had a conversation about where we should go. And they wanted to go to the Caribbean. I wanted to go to London, and since I was paying, we went to London, which was interesting because it did give us an opportunity, in a sense, to celebrate Christmas, because it's a very English holiday the way we Americans celebrate it, but in a very different venue. So we spent 7 days in London in a cousin's apartment. Went to the Royal Albert Hall for the Christmas sing, and Westminster Abbey for evening vespers on Christmas Eve, and generally had a pretty good time, although there was a lot of tension and electricity in the air, because I don't think any of us were too very willing at that point to bring the missing party into the conversation. So it was really a year that was a sort of hiatus from Christmas for us, from its traditional. But then after that, we were able to sort of reinstitute what we had been doing before. And as I mentioned, the way we brought Marcia back into the picture, if you will, was this ritual we had of going to Betty Rock, to this local little landmark on Long Island Sound, and putting these roses on the water and having some silence.
So for both of you, in evolving these new traditions or this new way to approach the holidays, was there resistance from anyone who thought you should be doing things differently, or any tussling over that? Or I didn't hear it.
No, I
and I don't mean
not,
to.
I didn't experience that whatsoever.
Yeah, I would say not, really not.
Cheryl, is that part of other people's experience, though?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's as unique as the individual and the family. As you were both saying that you didn't experience that, I was thinking to myself, what a blessing for both of you, because it can cause a lot of upheaval in the family with different people wanting different things and not being able to talk about it as much. So that's the key, being able to, as a group, be able to talk about it. And it sounded like that's what you both had.
Yeah, I would say that particularly with my two kids, that we really, through the course of that first year, developed incredibly open communications that probably would never have happened had it not been for this death in the midst of us. But we really developed a very strong bond that I think is still there.
So for the two of you, I'm not going to ask these guys yet, but for the two of you, for for the sake of folks who are watching this video or may hear about this at some point, what would you have to say to them in terms of whatever you could share about your experience? I mean, I heard you just say loud and clear that communication was a really strong and necessary step in the family's transition, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's important to stay away from the shoulds. The reason we ran off to London was to get away from the shoulds. You should do this. You should do that. You should. No, just get away from the shoulds, because what really matters is what's right for you and for other people that are grieving.
So, a question then, Greg, were those shoulds coming from others, or were the shoulds almost in the back of your own mind?
They're really in your own head.
Okay.
Or in my case, they were really in my own head.
In terms of what holidays had been like and how you did them, and we should be doing them, because we have this need to keep doing things the same way, and yet you wanted to make a change.
Yeah. And I would say if when you have an organization like Hospice available that has the services that it has, reach out. It's there. There are people who really know what to do to get you moving on the right track, and it's important to do that.
Laurel, it sounds like the group was a really good way for you to get through this.
The magic of the group is the fact that you're sitting around a table such as this, and every single person is having similar things that you are, and just to hear that someone else is experiencing that is incredibly powerful and such a relief. That's why I think I went for 5 years. I just needed to keep hearing that other people were feeling, experiencing what I was.
Cheryl, that reminds me of what you said before about witnessing.
Yes.
Be within.
Yes.
And that's what happens in the group.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Laurel, what else would you say to someone who's watching who might be in a situation similar to yours and Greg's?
I'm certainly going to concur with Greg. Communication is important, but for me, because my family was far away, I did not realize it until I needed to do a little bit of historical checking out. I went back and looked at some journals and went back into my emails to see what happened on that first holiday. And I had been really clear with my family as to what I was doing and what felt right. And I was also, it's kind of amazes me that I don't remember it, but I read this incredibly joyous email the day after Christmas that I came home and sent out to my family saying I just had the most wonderful 2 days with my family, and Charlie was there, and we did all the right things, and we cried and we laughed. And so whether it is communicating one-on-one or communicating with all the technology that we have now, or just in a journal, is very helpful.
Great.
Yeah.
Cheryl, do you have anything to add here toward the end of our conversation?
I do. And listening to the two of you has made it even more so for me. I think the vast majority of us don't enjoy the experience of grieving. However, if any one of us is going to open to love in life, you can bet that we're going to experience loss. And in my own life, I can certainly speak to having that loss and feeling the pain that comes with it. We have choices. Usually they're unconscious, but there are choices. One can either shut down and close out life and love, because you cannot love fully without having an opened heart. Or you can let that heart break and you can be in it, just like Laurel was talking about, doing all the right things. You know, you laughed, you cried, all of those pieces. You can live your grief. You can live it. And it really helps to be able to do that with people around you who care about you, whether it's those of us at a hospice or whether it's your own family or friends or co-workers, it doesn't matter. Allowing yourself to live it and go through it takes that broken heart and helps you mend it in such a way that it opens you then to new potentials. Just like with what Craig was saying, it opened a deeper ability to communicate with him, you and your kids. That's the potential there for any one of us. So I'd say go for it. Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing that I wanted to add to the conversation about planning for the holidays, while it's important to think about how you're going to be and how the holidays are going to be for you, and to think about what you want to do and what you don't want to do and communicate that. It's also important to give yourself permission to change your mind, because you may not feel that way when the time comes to go to that family party or that annual Christmas concert that you've always gone to. So just be gentle with yourself and be flexible and give yourself permission to change your plans.
Could I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Is that possible? I think sometimes people feel that you're supposed to get over your grief. And looking back for 11 years, I would say you never really get over your grief. That if you truly love someone, there's always a deep spot of sadness somewhere in your heart. And even if you've moved on and found a new relationship and done different things, that sadness is still there and held, and in some ways kind of precious. Because it provides you with a more empathetic perspective on life than if you haven't had that experience.
Laurel and Greg, thank you for sharing your stories. It was very moving. Thank you, Cheryl and Connie, for coming in. Brattleboro Area Hospice is 257-0775. It's 802-257-775. Give them a call. Thanks very much for joining us. Goodbye.